you know, I didn't really know I was just going to be let you lead and be like, what do you want to talk about, and just chat with you. But I think I kind of thought, I was like, I want to add that in there because, you know, amongst all the conversation and the meditation and what it is and all that, like, what is it that's going to be helpful for people to resonate with? And, you know, what is it someone goes, oh man, that's exactly what you said. That's how I feel now. You know, now this is a motivation for me to maybe go down that path. Yeah. So that point was like probably the one point that I was like, I'm going to talk about the actual observation of anxiety.
Hello, my name is Mete Glamazina. You have tuned into the In-Betweeners Checkup. Today I am talking to my brother-in-law, my brother-in-love, Isaac Rudolph. He has very kindly set aside some time today to have a bit of a chat in and around, I guess, his journey and some of the things that I guess both him and myself have taken on board as tools just to really deal with the world that we live in today. So Isaac, I'll pass it over to you, and if you can tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Thanks, Mate. So I've been in probably strength and conditioning industry for about 10 years. And probably about 5 or 6 years ago, about 5 years ago, I started meditating. I've struggled with anxiety most of my life, and that kind of stemmed back to the first time I remember actually kind of getting anxious was when I was probably about 10 years old. Grew up with a bit of domestic violence, watching my dad, you know, fight my mum. And I remember probably the first memory of getting anxiety is actually looking through the door and seeing my dad punching my mum, and then going into kind of a panic breathing, kind of what you'd call a panic attack. And then I remember the next time I got it, probably would have been, might have been, the memory's about 12, 13 years old, and having another kind of just a breathing attack out of nowhere, like what you'd call a panic anxiety attack. And my mum ended up taking me to hospital. But through meditation, it's kind of been clear to me to understand that it did stem from watching that domestic violence. That's where it first kind of started. Yeah. And who knows what happens. There's a lot of research on what happens when you're in the womb, and situations can happen, and there's a whole lot of things, science around that. But definitely my first memories of getting anxiety, proper panic attacks, is when I was probably about between 8 to 10 years old, watching, unfortunately seeing domestic violence right in front of me. Yeah. Wow. And so and so I struggled off and on with anxiety for years, and like it was a regular occurrence. And I guess I kind of, in my 20s, I kind of dulled it down with a lot of drinking and drug taking, kind of just, you know, numbing my senses. Hang around with the wrong crew, kind of got involved with gangs, a lot of drugs and alcohol and, you know, bad things. Then I kind of moved to Melbourne, turned my life around, and I started getting, like, feeling a lot better, eating better, eating good food. Obviously exercise plays a big role, but there was still something missing. I would still get these anxiety attacks, you know. And so I remember one day, probably 5 or 6 years ago, I had a proper anxiety attack again, where I couldn't breathe properly. And I remember, just for some reason, I just knew I needed to start meditating. And I saw, you know, we can talk about signs. I saw a few signs, whereas I went on social media or online, and there was this like meditation ad popped up, and I was clearly like, oh, this has got to be the way for me, you know? Yeah. So I didn't know what I was doing, and I didn't know why, but I started meditating, and it's led me on a pretty big shift in my journey. Ended up going to India, to Rishikesh, the Himalayan town, which is where yoga first originated, and studying meditation there with your sister, my wife. Yes. And we've been back and forth from there. We've studied Ayurveda as well too, so we're both Ayurvedic practitioners. So studied meditation, Ayurveda, and been in the strength and conditioning industry for about 10 years. So kind of like integrated all those things, yoga, together with all those things, and developed a bit of a system that worked amazingly well for myself. And then I started integrating it with my clients, and now it's kind of the system that I work with nearly everybody, all my clients.
That's awesome.
Bit of it.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned, I guess, going back, that there were sort of a lot of things that perhaps weren't necessarily serving you in the environment you were in. what actually prompted you to make the move to Melbourne?
The universe, fate.
Yeah.
So my daughter moved down here with my ex,
Okay.
and my mum was down here, and there was a lot of bad things going on at the time with the people I was hanging around with. There was a lot of them were going to prison and things like that. So I guess it just seemed like the right thing. And my mum would say, just come down, try it. And your daughter's down here too with, with my ex. And so I just decided there was a lot of bad things going on where I was, and there was a lot of good in Melbourne. So.
Okay, cool. And like you kind of just, meditation just seemed to pop up for you as something to get into. Was there anything, I mean, you mentioned sort of you had another anxiety attack. Have you, looking back, and I guess this is a little bit on reflection, have you sort of seen there's any particular circumstance that or I guess this is past tense, tended to bring those things to the table for you?
Sorry, can you say that again?
So I guess prior to going through meditation, you talked about in your childhood you had those experiences around domestic violence that caused breathing difficulty and anxiety attacks for you. Later in life, before you started meditating, were you able to, I guess, understand what it was about your environment that created that as well? Like
that created like anxiety?
Yeah.
Yep. I didn't understand that until I started meditating.
Okay.
So I didn't understand. All these things became really clear to me upon delving into the journey of meditation, delving into understanding the mind and understanding myself, really. And so, none of this was really clear. We have no idea what we're doing sometimes until something happens, or, we gain a new perspective because, we're forced to, in my, the way it happened for me, moving to Melbourne and being in a better environment, meeting your sister. She's very nurturing and open to things and change. So I guess, I didn't really understand what I was doing and how I was perpetuating the cycle when I was doing it. It's now only in hindsight.
Yeah. And that's the difficulty is, we spend so much time in these things without truly appreciating it. Often it can be an event, it can be somebody saying something that kind of brings us out and we get this moment of clarity, and it's during that time what we do with that moment of clarity that can really sort of define the future circumstance, as it were. So with respect to, I guess, starting meditation, I mean, if I think for myself, I was introduced through a program that I did, and look, to be fair, it took a little while to actually I'm going to say truly meditate, and I kind of got these ideas of, I'm meditating now and I'm so good at meditating, which kind of is completely not what meditation is about. But it was, I guess it's like a lot of things, it's only through practice and dedication that you actually see the results. But the results you get, I guess, aren't necessarily the ones you expect, and it's
definitely,
and it's not so much even about expecting a result, which may sound strange to someone who hasn't started this journey. So I guess obviously you had an idea that you were going to get into meditation. How did you find that process initially?
Well, when I decided I need to start I started Googling, right? Just Googling stuff. And then as I was Googling and reading, a friend of mine, it was a clear sign to me. A friend was like, oh, have you read this book about meditation? And so, I can't remember what it was called. It was basically about transcendental meditation.
Yeah.
And so I saw it as a clear sign. I got the book and I started reading it. And that was really where my journey kind of started. Just having those little signs of like seeing an ad pop up and then someone asking me about, have I read this book? and then reading the book. And then like you, I had no idea what was going on. I'm just repeating a word in my head.
Yeah.
And you think it's about focus, you think it's about concentration, and you think it's about relaxation. And you really see as the journey goes on, you start to see, you know, how wrong you can be, but in a good way, because you learn so much. Sometimes when you understand that you know nothing, you're open to knowing so much more.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that's kind of the beauty of meditation, is you're kind of unraveling concepts, and you start understanding that you don't really know anything, especially about yourself, which is, I think, is the key to meditation. Is that the path of meditation is actually self-investigation.
Yeah. Yeah. And like I often describe meditation, like the practice of meditation is that, like, if you have a computer and it's running a whole lot of programs, and the RAM's all filled up, and it's going really slow because it's struggling to run all these things, it's having meditation is basically almost like resetting the computer and clearing out the RAM and the cache, so that everything just functions and performs at an optimum level. And it's kind of, I don't know if getting back to basics is right, but it's getting back to that sort of true self, as it were, which is really the only true existence in some respects. But we have a tendency to take a lot of our experiences from our past and apply them to create filters in which we view the world. A better term. And
100%.
while my childhood certainly didn't have the, I'm going to say, trauma that you necessarily experienced, there were things that I still took on board into heart that affected my life. And look, there are going to be people out there who have been a victim themselves of domestic violence. There are going to be people out there who have abused substances, abused themselves, and there are going to be people out there who are just struggling with the day-to-day stress of life, you know. And I feel, irrespective of where you've come from, meditation is something that anyone can get involved in, and it I don't know, wipe the slate clean is quite right, but it clears out all the crap that you've accumulated, and just allows you to get on without the burden of your experiences.
Yeah, it really unravels concepts. It's really all these things that we just unquestionably believed in our lives. It starts to just slowly unravel these things, and you start to see things as they are. You gain clarity. You know, I think there's a stat that talks about anxiety, and one of the things it says, it's the most prevalent mental health problem in the world. Like, it's huge. And I think social media and things are kind of like pushing people further in that direction, or creating more of an anxious kind of feel among the population. Another interesting stat was that I think it was around 80 to 90% of people who experience domestic violence or trauma as a child end up developing some sort of mental health problem, which is, wow. I think it was about 85-90%, which is absolutely huge. And you know, you live your life and you think it's normal for a while to feel the way you do, you know, but it's when you start to gain a little bit more clarity into what feeling normal is like and what isn't, then, you know, then you reflect and go, wow, I was like living like that my whole life, you know, living to numb myself down, and I was very confident on the outside and very not confident at all on the inside. And drinking alcohol was like one of those things where it's like inhibitions go to the wind, you know, dull the senses. And I relied on that, and you know, I have other family members who grew up with me and they still rely on that. And I wish in my heart they would do certain things, but you know, you can't push everyone to do things all the time. Sometimes it's just a natural thing that happens. But yeah, it's crazy to see the stats on mental health, on anxiety, mental health, and domestic violence. It's a huge thing and a big issue.
So I guess you talked about introducing meditation to your clients as such. Was there much resistance from them in trying it, and what sort of potential obstacles did you have to overcome there?
So I don't teach it to all of them. They all know that you know, I've been to India and I've you know, we've lived there and studied there and stuff. So they know at the start, when I first have consults with them, I give them what I offer and I let them choose. Most of them want to know about, at the very least, they want to understand about Ayurveda and digestive gut health, digestive health, and, you know, nutrition, body mind nutrition and things to do with Ayurveda. But then, you know, you start to see over time, people start talking about their anxiety and their psychological problems and stuff. And one thing I kind of like gently like to help people to understand, I think this is a really big misconception with meditation, is people believe that meditation is some sort of ancient, you know, mind massage technique where you do it and it relaxes you, and that's why you're supposed to do it. But the reality of meditation is that you're making fundamental discoveries about who and what you really are, about your mind. And this is one thing that I kind of think is mind blowing, is that in every single moment that we have in life, our mind is the one thing, the one tool. It's all we ever have in every moment. Yet nobody knows. If you ask anybody a question, tell me about how the mind works, or tell me about your mind, and it's like, what are you talking about? I don't know. So, and that's one of the things. That's the difference between, you know, a lot of people do a great job with meditation, but I don't see a lot of people trying to help people understand about how it is about understanding, you know, fundamental things about your mind and about yourself. Sam Harris actually does a beautiful job, and there's some other great teachers in India and such. But yeah, the old stress relieving technique, that's just the kind of a byproduct.
Yeah, it's interesting because, I mean, we talk about mental health and what we can do there, and, you know, like we'll exercise, we'll go to the gym, we'll brush our teeth for oral health, but what do we really do? Well, what do I guess majority of people do for their mental health? The short answer is probably not a lot. And like you say, I guess meditation is more than just a stress reliever, but I think in some ways it is the ultimate mental health exercise that one can add to their daily routine.
100%. I totally agreed. The thing about mental health, like let's look at anxiety, for example, right? Have you ever had anxiety before? You probably have. You've had
Yes.
like moments where you're deeply anxious.
Yep.
Have you ever broken that down? Like, have you ever observed it in motion, like what it feels like to have anxiety? Have you ever, because it's hard at the time, but you start to be able to observe it and feel it. But if you could think about, reflect on it, what would you say? How would you break that down?
I mean, there's definitely like,
what was your experience?
Yeah, I guess there's a feeling of tension in the body.
Yep.
And I mean, so that's with respect to the muscles, like literally are like clenching, and so there's a tightness in the chest, and I'm not going to say an inability to breathe, but even breathing itself is labored. The mind's generally racing like 100 miles an hour, all these different thoughts, probably definitely negative ones are kind of going through, and it's almost having a snowball effect. As much as the body is tense, I'm going to say I'm almost in like a state of paralysis, because I'm so consumed by the thoughts that are going on. I can't do anything else. I mean, look, this is just my experience. I don't know. Yes, there's a lot of nodding, so perhaps it's similar for yourself. I'm trying to think. My heart's racing just kind of thinking about it.
And this is the beautiful thing, is that when you, in those moments, meditation, the practice of sitting is actually teaching you to meditate throughout your day, right? As you know. And so when those moments come, you can observe them, right? And when you start to observe something, when you start to really notice it, see it intimately, then it starts to lose its power over you. And everything that you just said, the heart starts racing really fast. You know, most people will probably tell you that, yep, the heart races really fast, check. Labored breathing, that your breath starts shortening, going really fast, right? And then you might feel like a tight tension in the pit of the stomach. And these are feelings. These are accumulations. They're accumulations of sensations, right? And the other thing, the most important aspect of this is that your mind is thinking, and it's usually thinking about negative things, right? Well, it always is when you're having anxiety. But this is the really interesting thing, is like all those accumulation of sensations that we have becomes this one, the mind goes, anxiety. I'm having an anxiety attack, or it labels it, right?
Yeah.
But here's a real interesting thing about when you observe yourself, and I've done this so many times, getting those sensations of anxiety, is that these feelings can't last for more than a few minutes without your mind fueling the feelings, right? The thinking fuels the feelings, and the feelings fuel the thoughts, right? But unless your mind is fueling those feelings, anxiety starts to dissipate. It can't last long. And the practice of meditation, to be able to see a thought as a thought and literally dissolves in front of you, it stops those feelings, the accumulation of sensations of anxiety starts to just slowly start to relax. The heart slows down, the breath starts getting deeper, the tension in your stomach starts to ease. And it's a very peculiar thing about anxiety, is that it can't last for long unless your mind is fueling it. And if you've meditated over time, you have the ability to not be lost in the narrative of your own thought processes, right? Yeah. Most people who don't meditate, it was me for my majority of my life, you're just in your thought. You are your thoughts. In meditation, as you know, you have the ability to pull yourself out of that thought. And the moment you see the thought just as what it is as a thought, it dissipates right in front of you. And if you're doing that while those feelings of anxiety are coming about, they're just dissipating, you're pulling yourself out of the thought, these feelings just naturally start to relax. It's actually a really incredible thing. And over time, the more you do that, these whole feelings, they start to lose their power. They no longer have the same sting. They don't have the same bite anymore. And then the mind naturally catches on, and it just stops creating so many of those thoughts. But yeah, it's a fascinating thing, and that's what I find so fascinating about meditation, is your body and your mind become like a laboratory. Yeah, you're holding a microscope to the whole thing. It's an amazing thing.
Yeah, wow, that's that. Hey, look, I love the way you described it in that sense. And to be fair, although I completely agree with what you've said, in a lot of ways I haven't actually thought of it in that way. So it's quite good to, I guess, have that perspective and think that, you know, I've got that, I'm going to say, meditation tool belt, as it were, that can basically, I can call upon during those times where I need it. And I feel in a lot of ways we, in society these days, we aren't naturally given tools to cope with the stress and stuff that comes to us. And invariably it's only when we test it that it shows whether we have those coping mechanisms is the right word, but the ability tools to deal with it. And like you sort of mentioned earlier, you know, we can be in this state of distress for so long that it becomes our new normal, and someone says, oh, how are you? And you're fine, despite the fact that you might be hugely tense and trouble breathing, but it's you've just got used to that being the way you are, you know. And then you get things like adrenal fatigue and chronic fatigue and all sorts of physical and mental afflictions affecting us. And I mean, there's the classic one, you see those people, they're fit and healthy and they're running and doing lots of exercise and eating well, and then they drop down dead from a stroke or something, and you think, well, how on earth did that happen? Because they were so healthy. But in reality, there was all the stress there that they weren't able to deal with, and it got the better of them, I guess.
Yeah. The way we are on the outside, and I'm a classic example of this. People would never know. They would have thought, oh, Isaac's the most confident person. He's so confident. But it wasn't the case. I remember times when I was like, and I've always been into exercise, right? Into training and exercise. I remember before meditation, you know, like 6-7 years ago, going to dinner, I would need to like get really like kind of pissed just to sit across from someone. Like that's how nervous I felt about that. To sit at a dinner with people, with like 5 or 6 people you know, and people would think, and people would have never thought that.
Yeah.
That sitting down at a dinner with people that you know would be that big of an issue, but it was. And so this outward appearance that we give out is definitely not an indicator of what's going on the inside. We're taught not to, we're conditioned not to be, be vulnerable.
Yeah.
Especially males as well too, not to be vulnerable. But the thing is, and this is conversations with a lot of people over the years, and males, is like, I can tell you that everybody's struggling a little bit on the inside. Even the ones that seemingly are optimistic, they're struggling too. Everyone's having the same battles. If you have a mind, here's one of the things, discoveries of the nature of how the mind is, that when you look at it long enough, you start to see that it's not just, it doesn't just solve problems, but it creates them. We think, and the mind is a beautiful thing, we think, it solves problems, it's great, it solves problems, I can do this, and mathematics and algorithm, all this kind of stuff, learn and whatever, which is great, but it also creates problems. There's times when you once I get over to the beach in Bali, I'm going to have absolutely no dramas, no problems whatsoever. You get over to the beach on Bali, and your mind creates problems. Bring my sunscreen, the sun's too hot, the water's like this, the wind's too much, so-and-so said this to me earlier. It never stops. And when you start to observe your day-to-day activities, you see that your mind is literally creating problems over and over and over and over again. It solves them, but it creates them too.
Yeah.
It perpetuates the whole cycle.
Our mind is our own worst enemy in that respect.
It's great in other ways, absolutely phenomenal. Like, look at the world that it's built, it's phenomenal. But it does the overthinking mind. In practical sense, the mind's amazing. And, sharing beautiful moments with people and art and things like that, incredible. But in an overthinking sense, and you'll be hard pressed to meet anyone who isn't overthinking, unless, they might have been in India in the caves for 10 years and they don't have any thoughts left in their mind. Yeah. Maybe they're good, but you'd be hard pressed to find someone who isn't overthinking and creating problems for themselves. I've never met someone who doesn't. But it's interesting too, like, just going back to what anxiety is, when you break down those sensations, because they're really just sensations. Like, the heart beating is a sensation, the breath is a sensation. What I started to figure out is, like, I looked at these individual things and I'm like, okay, so first and foremost, when you eat certain food, you feel a certain way. It affects you in that day and probably the next day. So your gut health and your mind are intimately connected. So when you eat certain food, it creates certain moods and feelings within the body, right? So number one, you have to look at your diet. That's the easiest part for people. You've got to look at your diet. The other thing too is you see your breath, right? And one thing I've always worked on with all my clients is every single person I've ever done breath work with, they're breathing terribly. I was my entire life, right? Shallow breathing into the clavicle, into the chest, reverse breathing, where they think it's normal, where when you breathe in, your stomach actually deflates, like goes in, pushes in towards your rib cage. And then when you breathe out, they're expanding their belly, which is the complete opposite. It's actually called reverse breathing.
Interesting.
So food, correcting your breathing, and then obviously, like, some level of fitness for your heart, because the heart's the other aspect in that. It's like, dun, 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 and underneath it, there's kind of a fear that, am I going to die right now? Because, my heart's beating so fast. So cardiovascular fitness, eating right, breathing right, but I did all of those things, but nothing really changed until I started to understand my mind. You know what I mean? That's the fundamental. That's like the king on top of all of those little things that we work on. That's the leader. That's the one that you have to work on. And it is confronting at first. And I see why people don't really want to do it most of the time, because looking at your own thoughts and mind it's not always pretty.
Yeah,
especially at the start.
Yeah, and people say, I tried meditation and it didn't work for me. And I kind of think, well, maybe they didn't try the right meditation for them, or maybe they just weren't ready for it. I don't know. I mean, it's an interesting. There are a number of different forms of meditation out there, and I think some will resonate with some people more than others. So I would only suggest that if you try one and it doesn't work for you, don't stop there, but try a few others before you say no to it completely.
What do you like? What kind of meditation do you like?
So for me, I do transcendental meditation, and to be fair, that's really probably I've done a few others, but that's been, I found that just worked for me, so I didn't really need to dabble elsewhere. But there have been times where I've had an opportunity to do something else, so I thought, oh yeah, I'll be open to the experience and giving it a go, and it has worked for me. Has it worked as well? Compared, I don't know, but then it may be just because I'm more practiced in that one form, so that's naturally just going to come to me more now.
Yeah, I did transcendental for a few years too. I enjoyed it. It helped me on my path. I really enjoyed it. But the fantastic thing, like you said, is there are a ton of different techniques, so many. The only kind of problem I have with it is that when meditation gets turned into a relaxation technique, like I'm not saying that it will relax you as a byproduct, but I guess what I myself and your sister, my wife, teach in our we do Essence of Meditation course, is that we teach that meditation is essentially holding a microscope up to your mind. It's like when you learn just to be able to observe things as they are, that's one of the things that can really make fundamental change in your life. And that's kind of like whatever technique works at the start, I'm all for. Like you love doing it, because they all lead to the same thing anyway. Like whether you're doing transcendental, whether you're doing Vipassana, whatever it is that you're doing, mindfulness, if you stick with it long enough, it leads to the same path, and that path is always self-investigation. So yeah, whatever works for you at the start is good, but just sticking to it is the key, I guess.
Yes. It's that discipline and that dedication, and to be fair, I mean, it's like a lot of things. You won't see. Well, I don't know if you necessarily see results from meditation, but you won't be able to recognize the impact without that effort. And initially, it takes a lot to, I'm going to say, quiet the mind, because it's so used to being very active and such like. But because that's been the normal that's been created. But over time, you come to appreciate that, I'm going to say, the quiet mind is the actual normal. And that's when the meditative state becomes your base.
Easy to rest into, I guess. It's easy to rest into. Yeah, it's interesting. I think a big change I remember in my meditation, in my practice, would be when I started to relax all my efforts. You start concentrating on things at first and focus, but that's a mind technique to focus and concentrate. When I started to relax my efforts and I stopped concentrating, some big understandings, I guess, opened up to me in those moments, because I guess you try really hard for a while, you're always trying, and even as paradoxically, when you try to relax your efforts, it's still trying. So learning to relax a lot of my efforts in meditation was a big game changer for me. And also, this is one of my favorite teachers of all time, Jiddu Krishnamurti. Changed my life, absolutely changed my life. He talks about what's the use of sitting in the corner for 20 minutes a day and meditating, and then walking off and being completely unaware for the rest of your day.
Yeah.
What's the point in that? What's the point in it? And that's been that was another huge shift for me, is to start to stand up for my meditation and become aware in my day-to-day on whatever I'm doing. Because in essence, all you're really doing at the start of most meditations is you're trying to become aware that you're thinking. That's pretty much what's happening. Like, you're trying to realize that you're thinking and then go back to whatever it is you're focusing on. And that's the same thing now throughout my day. For my days, just like I'll be lost in thought, boom, realize that I'm lost in thought. becoming aware of being unaware, I guess, is kind of like the goal, even though we won't say they're supposed to be a goal, but that's essentially what it is at the start, right?
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's crazy. Wow. So, hey, look, I guess that's a lot to take on board for someone who is perhaps getting into meditation to start with. But I think for those who have dabbled or have maybe spent time meditating as well, there's certainly going to be aspects that resonate there for you. What would you suggest for someone who was kind of looking to get into meditation in some form, and they weren't too sure how to start?
I'd suggest waiting for me to build my app in my no, but we are building an app which is going to cover a lot of the things that we talked about, but that's neither here nor there. Who I like who's very different from most of the apps and meditation teachers that try to just help you to relax, I guess, and concentrate. Sam Harris is great. Yeah, I would say he's very similar kind of things that we've been talking about, where he like teaches that you're not just trying to relax yourself, you're not just trying to concentrate, you're actually starting to understand, things about your mind. Your whole body and mind's a laboratory, and that's what meditation is, just observing whatever is actually happening. And through that, it sounds so like nothing happens, and but over time you start to really gain incredible insight. So I would say, my app when it comes out next year. But until then, Sam Harris.
Awesome. Thank you, Isaac. And I mean, look, you talked about your journey and the events that set things up and how you've kind of worked through that. I guess what do you see as the next chapter in your journey, shall we say?
The next chapter. So as I was just giving a shameless plug before for our online project, is we're working on creating an app that basically covers probably all the bases of health and wellness, understanding the mind, all kinds of things we talked about in relation to anxiety. I don't really want to say too much, because at the moment there's nothing quite out there quite like it. So I don't want to, until we get closer to it, I won't say too much about it. But we're building this online project. We're really excited. It's a passion project. It actually, we'll say it's the culmination of the last decade of our learnings of all the things we've done in Australia here, our studies in India, and we're putting it all together. And some of the things we helped your mum with when she beat cancer naturally as well. So a lot of the things we worked on with her, things that we do in our day-to-day life, and a lot of our clients do as well too, just help change their life. So building that up, and then I don't know, I guess I turn 40 at the end of next year. So I think after we build this app and website, we'll just continue to do that and add more content to that, and then potentially go to India to live for a while. I think that's what I'd like to do.
Wow, that's beautiful.
Go back to the Himalayas,
yeah. And so if someone wanted to be able to, I guess, see the progress in your journey, how could they best do that at this time?
So we've got an Instagram page called The Authentic 3. And The Authentic 3 is just there's a lot of different things about health, about Ayurveda, about gut health, about understanding the mind, a lot of stuff about anxiety as well too, which will give little tips and tricks to people. And I guess until we really finalize building this app, The Authentic 3 on Instagram is probably the best way to kind of follow our journey and see the building of our project, and learn. So hopefully the idea of it is really for us to help as many people as we can. I want to help as many people who struggle with anxiety and with overthinking and over worrying. I feel like that's a kind of a mission for me now. Instagram right now until our project's built.
Awesome. Hey, listen, well, I would certainly be watching that. So listen, I want to thank you again for taking the time today to share your story with myself and those others that are listening. And while I guess we've both been in the meditation space for a little while now, I've certainly appreciated, I guess, your perspective on things, and I'm going to take that on board for myself and reflect during my meditation practices. So thanks again, Isaac.
Thank you so much for having us, Brian. I always love talking to you. You know, I learn just as much of you when we talk as well too, and reflect on our conversations. It's great. It's amazing.
Cool. Thank you.